everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DoubleDM podcast, where myself and Emil talk about different topics all the time. This time it is combat.
Yay.
And yeah, but before we get into the main topic, I think we should explain what happened this week. Is there anything specific you want to talk about?
There actually happened quite a lot. I finally grinded the Battle Academia Prestige Leona skin for myself. That took me 3.5 weeks. 3.5 weeks of basically grinding League all day to actually get that stuff.
Condolences.
I am very happy with the skin. I love it.
It's gorgeous.
It is. So, anything TTRPG related?
For me?
Yes, obviously. Start.
Yeah, we had the Witcher campaign.
Yes, we did.
Again,
we did have
Saturday.
Yeah.
I was a bit late, but we just dove right into combat.
Mm.
It was a weird one. And now I think we have a specific goal.
You do?
That we have to achieve.
Well, you tell me, right?
Yeah. Or at least that's what the group decided.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the whole thing, but the ending was...
The ending was scary, good. Right? The ending was scary.
The ending was...
So please...
hella scary.
Please, because the people at home obviously don't know the ending. Yeah. And I, as the DM, don't want to talk about this now. But at least I don't want to tell it. You can do that. What actually happened? Like, from the combat to where it is now. Give me a short synopsis of the session.
So, we started with the combat and fought a grave hag.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, grave hag. Then we were a little bit battered after the combat, so we went, after we rescued a bunch of mages, we went into a tavern and slept there. Our bard was touched or marked by something.
Marked by something. By a returner.
We don't know yet. By a returner, alright. Our characters don't know what that is yet. It's just some sort of legend we heard about. And she went to sleep in one bed and woke up in another.
That's something. I'm gonna intervene here for a quick second. Yep. The Legend of the Returner, because I obviously have the notes in my head. The Legend of the Returner was basically that if one person is marked by a returner, they basically sleepwalk into the forest and never come back again. So that this bard stands up at night and changes bed is already quite distressing for the rest of them, because, well, you sleepwalk into the forest. Well, you just sleepwalk 2 beds. Like, it is a minor detail, but it's still there.
It's first step, yeah. Well, but we didn't figure out or know about this legend until the next morning when we talked to the barmaid.
Mm-hmm.
So our bard was kind of scared now.
Granted, that's normal.
Yeah, I don't blame her. Then my character, a mage, tried to calm her down, which was kind of successful. And then our Witcher character said something to calm her down, but it didn't. It just made it worse. And then we walked right into the next city, Oxenfurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gathered some information, got a new quest sort of thing, went to sleep again, and on the next morning, the bard was gone. We don't know where he went, or she went, where she went.
It's a she.
And yeah.
It's quite distressing, and I loved it.
Yeah. We don't have any fucking clue where she could have went.
As you obviously shouldn't, because I didn't want to give you any information until now.
Yeah, I know, but
like I ended the session exactly at the point where the Witcher woke up, just saw an empty bed, and that's over. Like, you tied her to the bed, You tied her down. All four limbs to the bed, and one time around the whole waist. And she still disappeared.
And the ropes seem to be
Cut.
burst by pure strength.
Yeah, burst by pure strength.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I said.
Yeah. That's even scarier because the bard isn't that physically strong.
Nope. Not at all.
So...
Not at all.
Well, we have to find out. Yeah, that's basically what happened in our Witcher campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I
I'm quite
have my
happy
next
with what
session for... Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it. I have my next session for the Icewind Dale campaign coming up this Sunday when this episode releases. Probably we are done by then. But yeah, they were just banned from one of the cities in Icewind Dale. They aren't allowed to come back because they just kind of attacked the castle there.
Yeah,
Not really attacked, but...
It happens, right?
Yeah. Intimidate or try to intimidate their way into the castle, which is always a good idea.
It can work, but it's usually not the best idea.
Yeah, it isn't. You
had
something this week, right?
Yeah, I have a big session coming up. My players just finished more or less the second chapter of our campaign, of our first story arc, and are now entering Zonda, the capital city of the country they are in right now. And basically they have some story leading to the city and some plot hooks there, but more or less they are there on their own free will for, hey, we just want to be here. It's a little bit of like, okay, yeah, you can go to the guild there to talk with someone about the things you found out. You can talk to the guard because you found other things out, but that's just talks. Those are like done in an hour, and then you are free to do whatever you want in the city, and that is quite scary for me because I haven't prepped a thing yet. I will have some, like, I can go on their stories, like they have some things they want to do, and I can prep that, and then I can prep a little bit, like a market, a few shops, like a simple side quest, but generally I wanted them to actually do what they wanted to do now, instead of giving them another plot hook and just saying, hey, you've got information, do with that what you want to do with it. And if your next session starts in a fucking ruin on the other side of the continent, that's okay by me. So I don't really know what will happen. So it's always a little bit scary if you have this big sandbox coming up.
You have to prep so much.
Well, I don't think you need to prep that much. I don't. Just the thing of, like, when you have a sandbox thing coming up, I think you can prep a way broader and less in depth. So you don't have to prep everything to the last detail. So it's easier, but you need to prep more. So it's a little bit give or take, and it's usually the same. Like, for me at least. So I don't know what they're gonna do, and I just hope they actually use the information they have to do something with it. I don't know what, but I want them to do something and not just disregard it as, yeah, we have that now, and now we can do this. And why do you want to help the merchant repair his card again? Well, it brings money. No, please don't. Like, if they want to, they can, but they have this information, this very interesting plot hooks. Actually, they have 3 plot hooks, and I just want them to follow
3,
one.
Actually.
There's 3, actually. Yeah, they have 3. Like, they are all minor. Like, they are not really big ones they need to follow for the story to go further. But if they do, I can make a very fun few sessions out of it for them. And if they don't, I don't. That's why I always only prep 1 or 2 sessions ahead, and never like 5 or 6, because I don't know what they're gonna do in like 4 weeks.
I usually prep as well 2 at most.
Yeah.
In advance.
also if you're in a dungeon, right, you can prep the whole dungeon, and even if that takes 6 sessions, then that takes 6 sessions, but you have prepped the whole dungeon.
If the dungeon isn't anything that or anything major that could happen except when they say,
well, there are also enough players in that dungeon to do some weird shit.
Yeah, I mean, if they say, yeah, we want to teleport out, I don't want to deal with it anymore. Sure,
do that.
Go there. I have this prep. Totally. Yeah. Sure. Go ahead. You can do it.
I've also had my first tournament session of the big tournament arc that's in my other campaign, and that was quite interesting because it was basically gladiatorial one-on-one combats for every player, and a lot of NPCs. But obviously, I just don't make any NPC combat because it's boring as fuck. And that's actually quite interesting for today's episode because it's one-on-one combat. And one-on-one combat works, in my opinion, a lot differently than having group combats.
Definitely.
Without getting too much into it, like, having group combat is quite different than one-on-one combat because one-on-one combat is a lot of features that you get in D&D are also sometimes group-based. Like the Paladin aura for getting saving throw bonuses to allies, that's more or less useless. Like, you can only use it, you only have it for yourself. But the actual strength of that thing comes when you have a group.
Yeah.
So gladiatorial combat is, you need to do, like, as a character and as a player and as a DM, you need to do a lot of different prep for one-on-one combat than group combat, because the one-on-one combat works differently than the groups do.
Yeah.
But the session went great. They've got some very interesting stuff. One of the players went on a date.
All right.
With the shopkeeper. I mean, he wanted to, so I let him.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, he wanted
Romance
to.
is always good.
Yeah, like we talked about in episode 4. You should go listen to that, by the way. No, romance is cool,
was
right?
Was it 4 or 3?
4. 3 was the COVID episode.
Yeah.
For me, like, I never really said anything about romance in the beginning of the campaign. Like, I never had that discussion in session 0 with my players.
Mm-hmm.
But I told them that if they want to do it, they can, but I necessarily won't initiate anything along those lines. Like, the shopkeeper seemed interested in him, but that was because he was another tiefling, and not necessarily because there was a love interest in there. But now there is.
Yeah, and I mean, as long as the players initiate it, I will go with it.
Yeah, obviously. Like, as long as both parties are okay with it, it's fine.
Yeah. And because we play mostly with our friends, we more or less know what they are okay with and not. So that's not a huge deal that you didn't address.
If I would play with people that I'm not so familiar with, I definitely would have talked about that in the session 0. Like,
yeah,
because that can be something that steps boundaries, that like oversteps boundaries. That topic. So there's something you need to be you need to be careful with it, but we are a friend group, it's simple for us, and nobody had a problem with it, so it's fine. We nearly had 200 listens.
Yeah, I mean, the episode last Sunday just blew up, I guess.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Because it was an amazing episode, I mean, I have to say.
It was.
Endless Skyrim. I will say it again. Endless Skyrim.
Endless Skyrim. I'm so for that. But it's our second most listened episode already.
Yeah.
Just directly behind the first one.
Yeah, let's not talk about the first episode. It's the most listened to.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah. It's just insane, and I think we're at around 960 followers on Twitter.
Around that,
nearly at 1,000. That's insane as well. I mean,
yeah, that's gonna be an amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously...
For that, we have a giveaway.
Yeah, exactly.
Planned.
I wanted to say that.
Or we are still planning to do that.
When we reach 1K followers on Twitter, we will do a giveaway. Probably dice. Maybe a digital book for D&D Beyond or something. I don't know actually yet. So stay tuned for that.
Or some sort of dice accessory or...
Yeah, something along the lines. Something that people want.
We still have to decide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, today's topic is combat, like we already talked about. I would like to propose the first question to you.
Yeah.
What
Go ahead.
do you plan for combat ahead of time? Before the session or before in the session it comes to combat?
It kind of depends if it's story relevant or not.
Mm-hmm.
If it's some sort of environmental encounter or encounter during a travel time, I don't plan that much.
Like it's a random encounter, right?
Exactly. But I plan the random encounters ahead. I don't roll them during the session.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, it just slows the whole game down because you have to look up stats and some and sort of things. So I roll the random encounters during my prep phase and get all the stats. And that's basically it for the random encounters. I don't do battle maps. I don't do some sort of specialized music or sound effects or something. But if it's story related, I'll generally either have a battle map through the module we're playing, or I just make it myself. I get the stats for the monsters.
Yeah.
I think of some sort of starting position, and maybe some music that goes along with it.
If you want to listen more about music, you should listen to episode 9 with Eli from Mayday Roleplay, because first of all, she is amazing. Second of all, the episode is amazing. Third of all, Mayday Roleplay is amazing. And fourth of all, music is amazing. Boom.
Exactly. There you have it. Go listen to it.
Yeah.
And we talk in this episode, or in episode 9, we talk about what you should think about when choosing the right music for combat or something like that. And one thing I like to plan ahead of time for combat is tactics for the enemies.
Okay.
Or especially if they're more intelligent.
Yeah, okay, let's go into that a little bit, I think. What sort of tactics would come to mind? What type of tactics did you use? All that sort of stuff. Anything interesting?
Depending on the NPC or enemy they are fighting. If they are fighting some sort of monster or a pack hunting thing, for example, if they fight a bunch of winter wolves in my campaign, for example, obviously the wolves will pack hunt and try to single out a single target and take it down. And if it is humanoid kind of enemy, they will, or if they have a little bit of intelligence, they probably will go for spellcasters first, because they can debuff them. They can slow them down. They can levitate them so they can't move or something like that. But regarding that, they don't just walk right through the front line. If there is some sort of standard battle formation from the players.
Definitely. Like monsters know what they are doing. That's the name of a big, I think, supplement or web. I don't actually know, but it's definitely a big thing in the community. Any kind of monster knows what they're doing, even if their intelligence is 3, because now I can tell you something from real world biology. If something survives, that's for a reason, not because of luck necessarily, at least.
Exactly.
If
one individual may be lucky, but the whole species isn't.
No, exactly. Like lions, they can be like. I try to think of an animal that's actually pretty dumb, but I can't really think of one because all what they have is something like sort of a primal instinct, going for the weakest enemy. Like if you're in water, right? If you're underwater and one of your players starts bleeding, sharks may go for that enemy first because he is wounded. He's wounded, and second of all, he actually attracts the sharks.
Yeah.
So that is the main target. And
most of all, animals in the real world don't just spread their attacks, if you want to say it like that, on different persons. They try to single out a specific one and take this one down before they move on to the next one.
If it is a chase scene, right, you go for the slowest enemy.
Yeah.
Because they are gonna be the ones you can catch up to. They are gonna be the ones that are the easiest to catch. So you will single out that one. So you would always, as a DM, if you have a monster, you need to think about what this monster actually wants in the combat. Because yes, you can throw something mindlessly at your players just so you can roll some dice. That's totally fine if you want to do that. I have done it before. It's something to get the players maybe distracted, maybe actually plan in your head the next thing that actually comes up in the campaign. Or just to do some mindless dice rolling before the players before you end the session. That is totally fine. But you need to normally think, what actually does the enemy want? Because each enemy in D&D at least has some sort of motivation. Like an undead is more, maybe like not necessarily a motivation, but a drive. Like a zombie or a skeleton, they are in the lore risen by a necromancer, so they are more or less commanded. So what is their command? Take out any other spellcaster. So they will go for spellcasters first. Kill every traveler across this path. Then they will go for the traveler that comes first. Or like obviously you also as the DM need to pay attention to not overwhelm your players. You don't you combat is can be something very volatile because it's the part where the DM versus player mentality comes to life at best, because you control the enemy and they control their characters. So there is some sort of mentality, us versus them, because it is combat. You fight for your life. So it's obviously the I need to survive, they need to die mentality. And that, like, if it's just in the game, that's totally fine. That's supposed to be there. But obviously at the table, you don't need to hate on your DM just because that single enemy is actually attacking your character, because your character is the one standing out of line and it's the easiest target to hit.
Yeah. If he's vulnerable, the enemies will go for it.
Yeah.
That's just basic motivation, drive, or something. And regarding tactics, I just thought of a thing I did for a kind of a year back or so.
Okay.
They fought an kind of animal monstrosity thing, and one player went down, and the drive of this enemy was to get food.
Yeah.
So this monster just grabbed the downed PC and brought it, or tried to bring it into his lair.
Yeah.
So
that's a very common thing to do, right?
Tried to disengage and just book it for his lair.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped it, but that's something I like to use.
Because
then the healing spells are maybe out of range.
Yes.
If it's touch, definitely out of range. If it's healing word, the enemy might be more than 60 feet away.
Mm. That's very interesting, but that actually just brought up a thought in my head. Because if a player is looking for advice on how to more effectively win combat, because maybe combat is a little bit too not complicated, but too hard for you. Like if you're a player and combat is too hard for you because you don't really, like, the enemies move too quickly for you and too complex. Like the DM has a plan. Like the monsters have a plan. They know what they are doing, but you do not. Then, as a player, how about you try to, in your character obviously, try to find out what those monsters want, what the enemy wants. Because if you find out that drive, that motivation, you can exploit it. You can
counteract it.
You can work against it. If an enemy, if wolves go for the weakest enemy first, make the weakest enemy for them untargetable, protect them, or just stop them from engaging in combat with them. Like if you're a tank and the wizard behind you is getting attacked, what you need to do is get between him and the enemies, because you have opportunity attacks, and enemies don't nearly want to run away from you again if you are standing next to them, because they get an extra hit.
Push and shove attacks and throws and grappling comes into play.
Please use those kind of things if you're a player.
It's fucking underused and underrated.
It's underused, underrated, and I as the DM love it if my players use it against me. Yeah. It's like we had this the tournament session, right? We had preliminary rounds where everyone needed to fight, and they were graded and then selected into the tournament. I put up it was a 4-man free for all in a little arena, in just basically a wooden floor that ended at some point. And if you get shoved out of that wooden floor, you're out of the game. You're out of combat, right? You're not allowed to enter back in. And I had a fighter that had he didn't used the shove attack, but what he did, he had a sword that allowed him to control the wind around him and push enemies back. So what he did, because everyone started in a corner, was run into the middle, let enemies come to him, run to a corner, run around them when it was his turn, and push them out of the ring. He didn't even have to attack them. And it was genius, because he understood what the game was about. He understood the combat, the purpose, he understood it. He looked at his surroundings and found out a clever way to win a combat that he might not have actually won otherwise. Because he pushed 2 players out of the ring. There was a fourth. That was a wizard with spell slots prepared, flying in the air, unhittable for the fighter. So if the fighter took any more time with those 2, the wizard would have won the combat, because he would have just put a fireball into all 3 of them, damaged them all, and basically won the whole round with that. No, that player was so smart, because he used the environment around him, because he understood what the objective was. And for DM, if you want to, this episode, obviously running combat is not hard. Like, just roll some dice. But making combat interesting is giving the combat an objective. Making the combat not about killing, but about winning. That's not, because if you kill an enemy, you win the fight. But winning doesn't.
Of some other ways to win.
Yeah,
maybe.
Exactly.
Use the environment around you.
If you're fighting on a cliff, you don't need to kill the enemy. You can push him off the cliff. That will neutralize them. That will neutralize any threat for you. That's totally fine. That is an amazing way to end a combat and to end a session, if that session ends with that combat. Because shoving an enemy off a cliff is amazing. It's an amazing feeling for your players, right? One other thing that you said is starting position. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, actually.
But I have to intervene really quickly, because you mentioned it already. One thing we have to plan for combat as DMs is always environmental threats or differences. For example, the cliffs, the arena-bound drop after the
bounds,
floor.
Right. Different things
players can use.
Like poison gas, if you're walking through a swamp or sewers, shifting grounds. So maybe what I'm just thinking about is like a clockwork arena, right? Where you shift the battle map every time. Like having several battle maps, I don't know what they are called, interlocking mechanisms that basically turn the arena every time, so players get moved around a lot, and that's interesting as heck, actually. I need to do that somehow. No, because that's amazing, because then you have more than just an enemy, because for example, I have thought of combat isn't about just hitting stuff. Combat is some sort of puzzle. Finding out what will give you an advantage, what will win you the combat, and what will get you to your goal. Is your goal to kill the enemy? Then how can you do that the quickest way possible? Is your goal to run away? How can you escape? Is your goal to get to an entrance? How do you get there? Is your objective to survive? How do you do that? Like, those are the things that players and DMs need to think about, because combat isn't just enemies against players hitting, and using a spell. No, it's, like we already said, about using all these different things to make a very interesting and complex way of solving a problem. The problem being whatever you want from that combat. Having an enemy chase you, having an enemy try to kill you is simple, but having an enemy try to activate some sort of mechanism at the end of a bridge or something, like if you have a bridge, that's like you need to hold the line on a bridge and you have an enemy that needs to get over the bridge. That's very interesting because your objective is to hold them. Their objective is to get over over the bridge. So then you need to think about what is under the bridge. Is it a river? Is it lava? Is it lava, right? There's so much stuff you can think about, and it's like combat can be really interesting, and it can also be very boring very quickly.
Yeah. One environmental thing that is often overlooked, I think, is just the lighting situation.
Yeah.
In 5e, in general, you have enough players with dark vision.
I looked it up the other day. Exactly 50% of all races have some sort of dark vision.
Yeah. In my 7-player group, only 2 players have dark vision. So
in one of mine, we only have a gnome with dark vision. We have a dragonborn and 2 humans. No dark vision for them. And the gnome has dark vision. I also have a rule in place, if people remember that from the homebrew episode, where dark vision isn't necessarily as strong as before, because you still need a light source for 60 feet dark vision to actually see something. That can be a small candle you hold in your hand, or a torch or something, but you can then still see the 60 feet away. Like, a torch gives you 40 feet of in a radius of more or less light you can see in. That 60 feet gives you an additional 20 feet when nobody else can see something. That's still very good, but lighting situation is very important.
Because if no one can see in the dark, you make all your attacks with this disadvantage, and because you can't see.
And also, I would love to say something. If you think dark vision is OP, read the raw as written rules on dark vision. They are not OP, because you see something as if it was in dim light. I think you can't discern colors or any kind of details. You still make your attacks with disadvantage, I think, actually.
Wait,
you don't have to look that up now. Like, we don't want to slow this down.
Because if you don't have dark vision, you essentially have the blinded condition.
Yeah.
Sort of, I think. So you miss ranged attacks in general. Let me look that up real quick. Conditions.
Yeah, but the thing is,
a blinded creature can't see and automatically fails any ability check that requires sight. Attack rolls against the creature have advantage, and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage.
Yes.
So you're easier to hit. You don't hit as good, and you immediately fail. So you auto fail anything relying on sight.
What I want to say just with that is, read the rules on dark vision, because a lot of people think dark vision just means you have a night vision goggles on, because you don't. You don't. Dark vision is just so that people can see a little bit in darkness, but there's still a lot of stuff they can't discern. They can't really see. Like, if they are in 60 feet range of something, yes, they may be able to see something, but they don't necessarily know that it's a fucking T-Rex.
Yeah.
Well, they will probably know because of the foot stomping and roaring that will come with it,
but
yeah.
not because they see the T-Rex.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and I think in dim light you make perception checks relying on sight with disadvantage.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't auto-fail them, so there's a slight chance you might see them.
There's a lot of stuff, like lighting condition is very strong. Rain is another thing that obscures vision. Rain. I love it. Having a combat in rain and say anything that obscures vision is a nightmare to any caster and ranged character. And I know now you're gonna think, well, yes, this is something that, like, if I am an enemy, like a night, like those winter wolves we talked about for you, right? If I assume they are very good against cold damage. Do they have resistance or?
I think they are resistant to cold damage.
Yeah, obviously, and I think in general you can say they don't really feel the cold, so they will go hunting in a blizzard. So that is very scary because if you have a ranger, right? You generally think a ranger is someone that would hear, like if you have someone that is very perceptive. They might be able to hear the winter wolves, but they don't know from where they're coming from. And you only can see like 20 feet away. And boom! 3 winter wolves come out of the blizzard attacking you. That's a very amazing starting position for combat.
Yeah. And now, get this. In Icewind Dale, there are rules for blizzards. For example. And the first thing is they last for 2d4 hours, and in a radius or in a circle 100 feet around the storm, you have a disadvantage on perception checks relying on hearing.
Yeah,
because of the howling wind.
Yeah,
it blows out open flames, so your torch is useless.
Yeah.
If you're wandering in Icewind Dale, which is complete darkness nearly all the time, except between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., and during 2 hours during the nighttime, you are basically blind the whole time. You can't hear as good because of the howling wind. You can't track. You can't trace any tracks because the wind just erases them.
Yeah,
and flying through non-magical means is nearly impossible.
Like, see, I if you're having a combat, think about the weather, because I love weather as a condition in the game, because it's so amazing to obscure any kind of things with rain, clouds. Like, you can make it more or less completely dark if the sun is still up. If a wizard uses some dark magic to conjure some clouds across the sky so that no light can go through them, boom, sudden darkness.
Yep.
That's amazing, because that gives the wizard and maybe his incoming necromancer army a very good cover, and sets up for amazing combat, because only those with dark vision can see again. You need light sources, and you have a lot of stuff to think about. But like, you don't need to think about this all the time. You don't need to think about everything all the time, obviously. But I would suggest, if you're running combat, always think about one thing that makes the combat more interesting, more complex, and more cinematic. Like, think about one simple thing: weather, conditions, maybe timer effects. Like, if your players are are scouts for the army, and they have just sent a signal to the cavalry, like, that is over the hill there, and now they are fighting some sort of group from the other army. The timer effect is that the cavalry from your country moves in, from that your cavalry comes, and that is something like you need to only survive for 4 rounds until the cavalry is here, and you win the combat automatically.
Yeah, because a cavalry charge against foot soldiers is
yeah, exactly.
quite effective, to say the least.
Yeah,
or what happens if you are caught in one of those cavalry charges from the enemy?
You need to flee the cavalry now. That's also very interesting, and that is why always I like to focus on one small thing for normal combats, and for boss combats I like to really plan out the whole thing. Like, okay, what are the lighting conditions? What area of effects? What timers could there be? And all that stuff. So making that a really complex puzzle, puzzle you need to solve. Not only through hitting. Like, you can always use the brute force method of just hitting the enemy, but you can also try to entangle this Rubik's Cube, or like solve this Rubik's Cube of combat that is just a riddle or a puzzle.
And that makes it that much easier for you in combat.
Yeah.
If you just use brute force, for example, you don't have any ranged attacks in your party, by what means whatsoever. Maybe the bow broke down. You don't have a spellcaster, something like that. And you just try to hit the big bad. And he casts Fly on himself. Boom.
Boom.
You are done. Because you can't reach it. And then he can just bombard you with spells from above, or use his bow from above, or something like that. And you can't do shit. Except maybe try to throw your sword. And then you don't have a sword anymore.
Exactly. There's a lot of interesting stuff to think about. Again, back on those starting positions I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Because starting position is very interesting in combat as well. How does the combat start? Are the players getting ambushed? Where is the combat? Like, you can think about a map, right? If your players are ambushed at night while camping, your players will be bundled up together in a little camp. And they have...
Sounds like Fireball to me.
Sounds like Fireball to me, right? Maybe they are also still prone. Like, that can throw off a full first round for your players if they are all prone, or maybe even unconscious because they're sleeping. That throws a combat a whole lot out of the waters, because if you have bandits are maybe not scary enemies because they are just dudes with weapons, right? But if your players can't use a lot of their stuff in the first round because they are still unconscious, prone, maybe even blinded because no light in the darkness, that's very scary. That's a very scary thing. Like, that's a very good starting position. Maybe your players are the ones initiating combat, then they have probably the advantage. So starting position is a big thing to think about for me, because it defines how the combat works.
Yeah.
Are you in
and surprise rounds are a big one.
Yeah, surprise rounds are, in my opinion, the biggest thing.
The ones initiating combat usually have surprise rounds if they are not spotted or something like that.
Exactly.
And that's where the rogue thing from the assassin kicks in real good.
Yes. No, but yeah, exactly. Like, having to think about how the combat actually starts is very interesting, because from there you can go on to, okay, how do you turn that around? Like, okay, the enemy, the BBEG is flying up in the chamber, right? Already, before the combat actually started. Like, he's already flying in the air. And you don't have any real range, like, except for maybe the caster that has some scorching rays or something. And they don't want to waste them instantly.
Yeah, but you know for sure the big bad will go for that one first.
Yeah, exactly. But the starting position is obviously very disadvantageous, because you're on the ground, you don't have a lot of stuff to hit them, and you need to think about how to hit them. Maybe you actually just wait out the fly spell. That can be a tactic. Wait out their spell, right? Yeah. Or anything you can think about. Like, anytime you think about, okay, when is the moment I say roll initiative as a DM, that's the starting position of the combat. It can be before that, obviously, if there's some verbal combat going on before the combat, but that just changes then the starting position, because maybe your players are just distracting the enemy so the rogue can sneak up from behind and stab them in the first round already. That can be starting position again. Thinking about how the combat actually starts is a lot of interesting stuff. So now the combat has started. What are things a DM needs to pay attention to when actually running a combat?
In general, the basic stats of the monsters, like HP and AC, are the most important things.
Yeah.
If it comes to that, saving throws for them, but this is something you can look up on the fly real quick.
Yeah.
But AC and HP you should have ready all the time. And I think as a DM you should pay attention to the armor class and HP of the players as well.
That's what I wanted to say, because of how we do role-playing these days, role-playing games, because of the pandemic, we can't really go out and meet up. At least we can't now, maybe soon again.
Yeah, I hope.
They're on Roll20. I use Roll20. I can... every player has a token, and they have 3 main stats. I want them to put their HP in there, their AC, and their main resource. Because, for example, our fighter is a battle master, and they have these martial arts. Is it battle master die?
Superiority dice.
Superiority dice, exactly. We have a monk with martial arts style. We have
key points and stuff.
We have a wizard that puts their spell slots in there. We have a sorcerer that put their meta magic points in there, the sorcery points. The warlock puts their spell slots in there as well. Stuff like that.
For range dudes, maybe the ammunition.
Ammunition, exactly. Like some sort of main resource you normally use in a round.
Yeah.
So I, as the DM, can always see how good combat is going right now at the moment, because as a DM, I don't necessarily want to kill my players, right? Like, if the death happens, it happens, but I am not the one that if one of my players goes down, right? I won't have enemies.
Stab him 2 times.
Yeah, I don't have enemies that necessarily go out of their way to attack that target now. If they are already fighting with that target and it's more or less normal for them now to go for that finishing blow, then they will do that. But if I have a ranger at the end of the arena, for example, that is shooting the barbarian for all the combat, and then the wizard goes down and then shoots the wizard, I'm not going to do that. I will not do that. It can be a valid tactic, obviously, but I'm necessarily not the one to do that. So I like to see how my players are doing, because HP gives me a general information of how many hits they can take anymore. AC shows me the general thing of, okay, this is how many hits they will actually take. Like, right, we have an AC of 20. The enemy has a plus of 5. So they need to roll a 15 or higher to hit that AC. The chance of rolling a 15 or higher is around 25%.
Yeah.
And
so every 4th attack may hit.
Every 4th attack may hit. So that enemy has 2 attacks per round. So every 2 rounds he will land 1 hit. Expected, at least. So if you have only 5 HP left, that is still 2 rounds you survive. You can survive. So that's something. Then their main resource shows me how good they are actually doing, more or less in a different way. Because if the ranger only has 1 arrow left, yeah, fine, but you can shoot that and then you're out. And what do you do then? That's a big question. So that's a lot of stuff I like to keep track of always. And players, for the fucking love of God, keep track of those 3 things yourself.
Keep track of your fucking resources.
Keep track of your HP and your AC and your resources. I, as a DM, have a lot of stuff to worry about in combat. I am not the one, like if you have an ability, a feature you can use in combat, you can always ask me, like, if it's a turn, can I do that now? Because you may be interested, that you don't know the rules or behind it, or the wording isn't clear to you, then you can ask. But what I can't do is keep track of all your stuff for you. I will not remind you of your features you have. I have to worry about the features the monster has already.
Yeah.
And I have to worry about concentration checks, effects, conditions. Do you even know how complicated that is sometimes? Like, That
behind the
wizard,
screen
that
it's
wizard
just-
goes invisible. Okay, cool. He's invisible. I need to keep track of that because I still see him on the map. But
Yeah.
my monsters don't. So I need to keep track of that sort of thing. That's the problem. Like, I can't keep track of the abilities for you. I would love to, actually. Like, if I could, I would, but I can't.
Yeah.
So keep track of that stuff yourself. And I know it can be overwhelming. Trust me, I get that.
But sit behind the DM screen once and you think it's a cakewalk.
Yeah, exactly.
Trust us.
But if you have like 5 abilities on your or 5 feats on your character, and you lose track of 1 or 2 of them, that's totally fine. That is normal. That happens to everybody. Even I forget sometimes monsters have features or can use this sort of spell that was very helpful in the combat, but I didn't. So please try to keep track. And if you can't, that's not a problem. Like, when you're in a normal group combat, there is a lot of time for you to normally think this through. You have 3 other like if you're talking about the normal 4-player D&D group, you have around 3 player. You have 3 player turns and the monster and the enemy turns and the DM turns. Let's say that. To think about this stuff. Don't use that time to browse the internet for funny memes. Don't use this time to write someone on WhatsApp. Well, again, if it's important, that's more important than the game. Okay, I get that.
Or
right?
if you got your combat planned for the next round already, sure.
But I'm always the kind of person that says pay attention, but I am not your but I do not pay you. This is something like we always say. Like, if your boss calls in the middle of combat, I don't expect you to turn that call down because that can get you fired. Yeah. Right? That's something that I won't expect you, because when real life is calling, please answer to real life.
Yeah.
My game is for fun. And that's okay. If we would do this as a job, right, I would pay you for this, for playing with me. I would expect you to obviously turn that call down, because then I'm also your employer. So, yeah. One
thing I wanted to ask you real quick then, regarding rules, because you mentioned if someone has a rule question during game or during combat, how do you handle those?
It's simple. It depends on what they are asking. But for example, if a player does something that may be rules questionable, like we don't know the ruling behind it, I want to go into that first. I let it mostly slide how they wanted to slide, because mostly that's if it's not very clear cut, mostly it's something that is very, very fun, very cinematic, and very cool. And I will always let that go through. Definitely. After that has happened, after the player has done their cool shit, I will use the time I have as a DM, maybe in combat or even out of combat after that, to look up if that is actually allowed that way. If it isn't, I will think about if I should let them still use it or not. And if I come to the decision of, no, it's against the rules, we shouldn't do that because that can destroy the game in some sort of way, I will inform my players, hey, that doesn't work this way. I have allowed it for this now, but now I won't again.
From now on, it won't.
The rules say this. We agreed that we will play with these rules. We will play after the rules, right? Obviously, if you have some sort of thing that is more or less actually forbidden in the rules, but it's super cool, I will always let you do it. But if you want to, for example, I had a player hold a spell, hold Scorching Ray as a reaction to wait for the enemy to appear again in their line of sight. The rules on reading a spell say you need to cast the spell. To cast Scorching Ray, you need to be in range of the enemy. The enemy isn't in range, so what do? I was like, okay. And then I went further, and there it says you need to do any rolls. You need to prepare for the spell, you need to concentrate on it, but you can do the rolls after when the trigger when the trigger hits. So yeah, you're allowed to do that. But if it wouldn't have been allowed, I would have let them do that for the time until I found that rule. And if then I find out, hey, that's not allowed, I would have said, hey, I won't rectify any turn, but you can't do that again. Because it's not how this game is supposed to be played, and we want to do it that way. And
I usually do the same thing. I just go with my gut right in the moment, and then say, all right, let's do it this way. And then after the combat, or even after the whole session, we look it up together, and on the when we meet up next, we discuss it and come to a conclusion. Exactly
that way. Like, and if a player has a general rule question in the combat, I answer it. Like, hey, I have 25 feet of movement. How many spaces or squares is that on the field? And I tell them, well, a field is equal to 5 feet, so you can move 5 squares. And if they have like a question, how many bonus actions do I have per round? I answer that. Like you have,
obviously,
you have that
but
kind of
those
bonus
are
action.
things actually you should keep in mind when planning combat as well as a DM. But once you ran 1 or 2 combats, you have them in your head anyways, either as a player or as a DM in general. So you especially at 3rd or 5th level or something like that, where you get to use action, bonus action, and reactions nearly every turn. You just have in mind how many of those you have and what you can do for these.
Yeah, exactly. One more thing that is important, in my opinion, in combat is communication. Not between DM and players, but between player characters and enemies. Between enemies.
Or even other player characters.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because that is sort of the stuff we talked about with the tactics already. Monsters know what they are doing. They will communicate with each other if they have the chance. So, as a DM, you should use that as a tool for yourself to make the combat more interesting for your players. And your players, please, use communication. Communicate with the other players. Because not only is it very cool to actually do some sort of combo, but it also helps you guys actually do better in combat. Like, if that makes sense.
And one thing with communication is, for example, if humanoid enemies attack the group and they see that the wizard is preparing some sort of big spell, they can the boss can yell out, "Hey, that guy over there is dangerous. Get him!"
And then they will go for that guy
because they got no orders.
Exactly. And then the important thing is your players hear that orders as well. Players react to them. Please.
Don't ignore them. I mean, you can ignore them, obviously, but then the wizard dies.
Where the thing is, like, play how you want to play the game. Again, like, obviously. This is for fun. Yeah. You need to play how you want to play to have fun. But if you think about this, how to, like, if an enemy boss gives orders to his minions, those minions will obey those orders. And then you can, as a player, use that you know those orders to your advantage. Those minions will go for the wizard. So what we need to do is get the wizard away from the minions. What we could also do is put the minions in the conundrum. Attack the boss. Because the minions then need to think about either we kill the wizard, but our boss dies for that. Like, you have a lot of interesting stuff to think about as a player. And you take in a lot, like, as a player in combat, it's sometimes easy to forget what actually is happening around you, and you just see the enemy in front of you and hit it. But the DM mostly does a lot of passive or hidden stuff you don't really realize. And if you pay attention to those, I will fucking ask you to marry me, because that is something so sexy the player can do. Paying attention to the little things I do, like an enemy screaming just the word shit can already be a trigger. Like that enemy is hurt. We need to hit him now. He is trying to flee. Like that are simple things you can pick up on. And if you do, your DM will love you for it, because it's such an amazing feeling if the combat is engaging, right? Combat can be just hitting simple stuff, but combat can also be very, very, very interesting and engaging. Having enemies talk with each other, having enemies talk to players, having players talk with each other. This is all very engaging. Players engaging with the environment, like pulling a stone away and more or less this whole the whole cliff falls down, or like a big boulder rolls down the hill. Now you can use, like, if you are a player, pick up on all the things around you to use them in combat, because combat isn't just simple hitting stuff. It's a riddle. It's something you can think about. It's tactics, it's communication, it's a lot of more stuff than it's actually sometimes described to be.
Yeah.
It's not so simple. And no DM will fault you as a player for not picking up on everything in the combat. Because
definitely.
He proposed more or less an obstacle for you, and it's your way to get across it. He is gonna give you the stuff, and you can also ask for stuff. If you are on a wagon with your group and you get attacked by goblins from the sides, maybe a spellcaster that doesn't need to stand is safest if you crawl under the wagon. So you can ask your DM, hey, can I crawl under the wagon and then shoot still my spells from under the cart? And most DMs, at least I will always say yes, because I love that idea of
and you would get 3/4 cover.
3/4 cover. You are prone, obviously, so if you get hit, you are very easy to hit.
Or for at least for melee attacks, but ranged attacks,
obviously.
More difficult.
You obviously have some sort of obscured vision. You can't really see a lot of enemies, but you can see those around you, and like, use what you got in a combat. Combat isn't just doing stuff. Like, you don't have to go all out. You don't have to use all of your resources on a simple goblin, obviously. But also that is something that is also part of a riddle, right? If a DM has planned several combats after another, how much will the players use in the first, the second, the third, fourth combat? Because at some point they will run out of resources, spell slots, HP, maybe even their armor breaks, all that sort of stuff. You can play around so much stuff as a DM, and you can also use so much stuff as a player in a combat. Environments, objects, all that stuff is so interesting to actually think about. And I love it if my players pick up on stuff like the chandelier in the ballroom up top is connected to a rope on the side, and the enemy is standing right below it. Like, if a player realizes that and runs to that rope and cuts it, I, as a DM, love it. It's just incredible if a player picks up on it and uses that to his advantage. It's so cool, and it makes combat so interesting, complex, and cinematic too. If you engage with it. If you just roll some dice because you want to roll some dice, combat is not going to be cinematic. But if you engage with everything that a combat can be, it's going to be incredible. Trust me on this.
Describe how your attacks look. Describe how you block attacks if they don't hit you. If you dodge them, if you parry them. But they hit your armor, something like that. It just makes the feel of the combat that much more
it feels
interesting.
More incredible. But also, foregoing, like, if you're a fighter, you have 4 attacks around. You can hit an enemy 4 times with a longsword. Yay, that's 4d10 damage plus strength modifier times 4. Cool, let's be over with it. But then an artificer comes in, places their eldritch cannon on the ground that shoots the rope that the enemies need to actually get across to you, because you're on the ship, right? And the artificer places the arcane cannon down to shoot the rope that the enemies use to get across, to swing across. Boom.
Yeah.
Cut off the enemies. Now you just need to finish off those on your ground. Like, both turns are completely fine in D&D. The fighter maybe the best option for the fighter is to just hit the enemy in front of him, because it's the captain of the enemy crew, and if that captain goes down, the enemy crew will retreat. That may be fine, but that artificer turn is also very interesting, even if it doesn't deal enough damage. Doesn't deal any damage. Combat isn't about damage. Combat is about everything.
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I think artificers especially are really good at making things cinematic. I once played an alchemist artificer, and I every time I cast a spell, I described how I pull out different components, mix them in a small glass vial, and mix a potion, or
and then
something
throw
like
a bomb.
That,
what?
Or for example, I had some sort of contraption around my arm for the spell Melf's acid arrow. I mixed some sort of special acid, put this in the contraption, and shot the acid arrow.
Yeah.
That's just some flavor. It doesn't mean anything, but it makes the combat more cinematic.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we should slowly get into the wrapping up part. Not just the episode, but wrapping up combat.
Exactly. Wrapping up combat. Well, when does combat actually end, right? That's a big question.
Yeah.
The most general, universally true answer is if all enemies are dead, or if there is no combat anymore.
If they retreated to the point where you can't follow them quickly enough, would be another thing.
Yeah, exactly.
If they run away, if they hid for an elongated period of time, that could also end the combat.
What comes after combat?
Usually looting.
Yeah,
for most of adventuring groups.
Yeah,
because you have to loot and to level up.
And that's looting
all there is
another very interesting thing, because if an enemy has a flaming sword, the players should find that flaming sword there.
Except if they teleported him to another plane.
Yeah,
then
maybe.
Obviously, they shouldn't.
Maybe, but generally like this. There are some like I would never roll on a random loot table, because that enemy. Like I had some bandits recently that had a lot of oil vials and fire arrows and all that stuff. That is something my players now have. Those are tools.
Yep.
And those tools that the enemy could have used are now the players' tools. And that is very interesting, because the players saw some sort of very interesting tactic the enemy used, and now they're gonna use it themselves.
One thing I like about looting as well, especially when fighting monstrous enemies, is foraging. For example, hide, scales, teeth, claws, anything like that, or even meat if the campaign is set in something where you need to keep track of how much food you have, because you don't have any sort of city where you can restock your supplies. That's something to think about. Yeah.
That's good. Another thing we actually already talked about in another episode is combat. Wrapping up combat can be very, very intricate again. Is death. We talked about this in an episode with, check these out, Marka and Josh, who are both amazing. Their stream game is amazing. Their podcast game will be releasing on May 4th, which is in a couple of days.
And the episode was amazing as well.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun recording.
We talked a lot about of what to make of death and how to make a death meaningful in a game.
Yeah. Not only for NPCs, but not only for PCs, but NPCs as well.
Yeah, and death is a very interesting thing to wrap up combat, because if your players have finished killing the enemy, but one player's down, they have made the last death save, they are dead. Your players maybe don't even know that yet, because you do a hidden death save rule or something, and they rush over and see the dead corpse of their friend, and now they need to do something about it. They can revivify them. They can do They can do a lot of stuff. I don't want to get into it too much, because we already talked about it and we are a little bit over time already. So another thing to wrap up combat is letting enemies live. Intentionally live. taking them prisoner, showing mercy, all that sort of stuff is amazing for RP interaction, character development, and a lot of other stuff.
And you can get a lot of plot out of them because you can interrogate imprisoned enemies all the time.
Yeah. Like, combat can be described as rolling a lot of dice, right? And some people say that it actually hinders roleplay a lot. I will agree at the point that when you run combat, roleplay may get pushed back a little. But converting combat into a lot of roleplay opportunities, that is something you need to think of. Combat can be a great opener to stuff. And you arch nemesis that came onto the battlefield and completely destroyed the party, but let them live because they wanted to show their superiority.
Don't mess with me or else.
Yes.
I have the capabilities to do so.
Yes.
Don't mess with me.
Yes.
It's better for your own good.
Mwah, mwah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Combat is about using tools. Like I said this a lot of times, but combat is also a tool for the DM and the players to further the game into role-playing, into going into another chapter of the game because you killed the enemy of that chapter. It's
for getting character development opportunities.
Combat is a great way to get opportunities for your game, and in my opinion, every game needs some sort of combat. It can be verbal combat, right? You don't have to have fighting in the game if you don't want to fight, but combat is great is a great catalyst for opportunities afterwards and to bundle up opportunities from before. Like when we talked about planning combat, there was a lot of stuff, right? And if you play the combat, it all gets condensed into one thing, and then you can spread it out again, like a prism, right? Into this rainbow of different opportunities, and use combat effectively. Like, don't use it to just get your players to roll dice. Use it effectively as a way to make the story, the game, the characters more interesting. That's what I want to say.
And I think that about sums it up for this one.
Yeah, I think this episode is done.
Yeah. Thanks again for listening. We really thank you for all of the listens we got.
Yeah. Oh, I need to calm down from this one.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for following us either on Spotify, Anchor, something like that.
Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah. You're just amazing.
Check out our Discord.
Yeah.
Check out our Twitch channel.
Yeah, we did that.
We have a Twitch channel.
Sometime in the future, I'll try to make an art stream or something. Yeah. Where I'll draw
like in general,
our new Twitter header because I just got a art tablet and I'm still getting used to this. And if you want to see me fail, join us.
I would love to. Just for the failing part, not for the progress part, but for the failing part.
Of course.
But in general, for the Twitch channel, like we plan to do art streams. We maybe plan to do gaming. Like we do usually game a lot together, so we will maybe do that as well. Some Sea of Thieves, League of Legends, For the King are 3 games we actually play a lot together.
For the King, I hate and I love this game.
This game is incredibly shit. Also, it's amazing. Maybe we will do live episodes, live discussions with the chat, or maybe with other DMs. We will maybe actually also, I don't want to promise anything right now, but maybe actual play sessions as well, like one shots.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot. Yeah,
we definitely. I want to say, we have nothing planned yet. Don't think that there will be something in a week or something there, because we don't know. We just have one now.
Have the opportunity.
Exactly. The opportunity is there now, and we will update you on anything about that. So, yeah, exactly. We are nearly at 1K followers on Twitter. If we hit that goal...
amazing.
1K listens would be amazing, right? 1K followers would also be amazing, but if we hit that, we will have a giveaway on our Twitter. You can probably enter through a lot of different ways, so stay tuned for that. Next episode, we may have a guest again, maybe not. I don't know yet. We're still planning that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to say who it is yet because it's someone quite interesting, I think. Um, and yeah, that sums it up from my part.
Yeah, definitely. Follow us on Twitter,
Exactly.
Instagram at DoubleDM Pod. We have the Discord link in our link tree, which you can find on Twitter. I think our Twitch is at DoubleDM Pod as well, or DoubleDM, something like that. But it's not. There's nothing on there yet, and nothing planned. So if you wanna hop in, sure. But yeah, that's about it. Then hear you on the next one, and have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.